I will now request one of our earliest clients and a friend, and he's been a well-wisher. His name is VC Karthik. Karthik has been, Karthik met us about 10 years ago, and then from there onwards, we have been having fantastic association with him, and great to see his company growing from about 40 or 45 crores when we were working with him to 500 crores plus right now, and willing to go, ready to get listed. And such a fantastic journey, cracker of a entrepreneur. It is a privilege to have him as our client, and he is here to talk and wish and motivate the CFO Bridge staff. So we are starting with that session, and thank you, Karthik.
Check. I don't know whether I should take that as a sign. But anyway, Srini called me and he said, look, I want you to deliver a keynote address. So I looked up keynote address, right? So I said, what is it that you want me to do? So for the very few people that already know me in the audience, I can't sound smart for more than 10 minutes, right? That's if I try. So I'm not going to try, and that's in private. So I obviously can't sound smart for more than 10 minutes in public, so I'm not even going to try. So I looked up keynote, and typically like Srini, they said you have to inspire people, you have to motivate people. So inspiration to me is, a lot of people go drunk into a Jackie Chan movie last show. And when they come out, you notice most of them feel that they can be Jackie Chan, right? But that only happens if you're a quarter down and if it's the last show. And when you wake up in the morning, you're not Jackie Chan. So then you're back to your own life. So that's inspiration. Motivation, I think just in the CFO Bridge sort of family, there are folks who wake up in the morning and say, "Theek hai, aaj maine coffee pee liya, I'll run a marathon." And there are folks who will just climb mountains. So how exactly do you expect me to kind of inspire these people or motivate these people? It's very difficult. So I said, look, I'm not going to try all that. I'm just going to tell you a simple story, right? And I'm going to tell you the story of CFO Bridge through the eyes of a customer first, of course, one of their earliest customers, a friend, and a well-wisher, right? So like all good stories, let's start at the beginning. In the beginning, you will not believe this, but Srini was a rebel, right? Because who in their right mind gives up a job of being a CFO in a insurance company and starts a CFO firm, right? That itself is a big risk. If I were you, Srini, and if I was CFO of Bharti AXA, I wouldn't have done this, right? I was a bit of a rebel too, I still am, as you can figure out. But at that point of time, we engaged with CFO Bridge. In fact, Srini, we were not even 30 crores when we engaged with you. I don't know where that number came up from, but we were very small about it. I think 15, 20 crores. If I correct, because Akhilesh is my co-criminal from those days, from another cohort. So he remembers, I think we were 10, 15 crores, whatever it was. So I knew nothing of finance. My idea of cash flow was cash in bank at the end of the month, right? So my idea of P&L was cash in bank at the end of every quarter. And my idea for balance sheet was cash in bank at the end of every year. So this was the broad framework in which I operated. And then, of course, we hired CFO Bridge, which at that time was only Srini. There was no partners, there was no organization, and so on and so forth. And if I'm not mistaken, Manoj, if he's here, I remember Manoj also engaging with us at some point in time, right? Much later, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so the first year was spent just understanding finance, right? And we had some very uncomfortable conversations with our then auditors. And then Srini will unfortunately call a spade a spade. And then if he feels like it, he'll give some Tamil galis also, very respectfully, very respectfully. You won't feel, unless you understand Tamil, when Srini gives you a gali in Tamil, you'll feel that some polite conversation is going on, right? So, of course, 10 years have passed, you forget a lot, right? You don't really remember everything that happened in those 10 years. Nobody does, neither do I. But I remember some memorable moments. So we were also sharing each other's sort of passions as an entrepreneur or each other's vision. One thing I remember Srini telling me very clearly, he said, look, the objective of CFO Bridge is to offer champagne at wine prices. And that kind of just stuck with me, right? So since we are on the subject of alcohol, we discussed Jackie Chan, we discussed a quarter, then we discussed champagne. So I'm generally going to make alcohol the central theme of my keynote and not motivation and inspiration, right? So we started with alcohol, hopefully we'll end with alcohol. Uh, so he said this particular statement and it stuck. And clearly when I see this audience, you may not believe this, but at one point of time, CFO Bridge annual meetings used to be held inside a very, very small meeting room in a not so great hotel. I've been part of those meetings also, right? Just to come in and give customer feedback on what's happening and how they could improve their services. Clearly the champagne stroke wine market is not doing too badly. If I were to sum up the audience in this room and the clients and the way that you guys have grown in the last sort of decade. And from an sort of a rebel, clearly you are a tribe, right? Now it's a tribe. Slightly more, much larger than just one person and their vision. So a lot of talent, a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, and a lot of drive sort of sitting in the same room. I think the interesting part is that the proof of the pudding is right here in Acres Club, right? So from that small room, which I remember, which 5-6 people had a tough time getting into. These were the small rooms in a hotel banquet room. When you can't afford the large room, they'll give you the small room, right? If you know what I mean. So we used to meet in those rooms. So obviously I'm very happy that we're meeting in a much larger place and obviously the organization has grown. But here is where I want to say a very important thing, which is that when the going is good, actually the really good people pause and recalibrate. Right? Because what sort of got you here may or may not get you to the next level. So instead of inspiring you and motivating you, hopefully I'm going to throw a challenge which you can walk home with. And this also comes from one of my customers, right? So about 15 years ago, one of my customers asked me, because obviously we were running after a certain set of people. He asked me a simple question. He said, we see how many clients do you have in the Fortune 500? The answer is sort of self-explanatory, 500 clients. He said, look, if you service every single client in the Fortune 500, you'll still have only 500 clients. You'll still be running sort of an agency business. So that time these books had not been written. The Fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, all these things had not been written. But the client had the foresight to say that unless you expand the scope and the span of your offerings, you're not going to really, he was referring to two things, right? One was scale of the business, and the other was the purpose behind every business, right? So in this room, obviously there is a lot of talent, there is a lot of knowledge, but the question is, so there is profit, there is process, and obviously there is people. But the question is, can we make this slightly bigger than it is, or orders of magnitude bigger than it is? And I'll tell you why I asked that question, and I'll link it back to my own story a little later. The reason why I ask you this is that one more sentence that somebody taught me, not CFO Bridge, is that cash flow is like oxygen to a business. You run out of cash, you die, right? Pretty much. So I want to kind of modify that statement and say, if cash flow is the oxygen of the business, then financial knowledge, I promise the alcohol analogy, is like alcohol, right? You need it. You need some amount of it on a daily basis just to maintain your sanity, right? So this is the challenge that I'm going to throw to you folks. So if your bloodstream needs to be healthy, that needs to be 1, 2, 3 pegs of alcohol. Don't overdo it. You don't want to be raging alcoholics. You just want to be in a happy zone. So a couple of pegs need to go into your bloodstream on a regular basis. And come to think of it, if you're servicing the cream of the business right now and moving up the value chain, it's all fine and dandy. But don't forget that there are 8 million SMEs in this country alone. And all of them, finance is such an important function. Of course, today we have our own CFO. And through this journey and through the journey of our own CFO, I realized what an important function finance is and how close it is to the founder's office and to the CEO's office, right? And if we hold that statement to be true, and if we hold that 8 million SMEs exist in this country, then I think if you can expand the scope of your purpose, not necessarily the scope of your value chain, you will understand that getting financial knowledge to these people. Now, it doesn't need to be a bespoke white glove service, right? It can be something as simple as country liquor. And when I say that, the bottom of the pyramid, it could be something as simple as an Excel. It could be something as simple as a Word document. It could be something as simple as a PDF file, or even what you're doing right now, SME Vidya shared across digital platforms, which doesn't really cost you money. Then I think you're impacting the lives of 8 million SMEs, which in turn you're impacting the lives of sort of maybe 100 million people or 50 million people. I think the point that I'm trying to make is, if you find the purpose, then profits will have no choice but to naturally follow you. And sort of with that country liquor analogy, I also want to end where I started. We found our purpose. It took us a long time, but we found our purpose inside Buzzworks. And that's how we grew from a sort of a 10, 15 crore company, which was solely focused on making profits, to like a 500 crore organization. And clearly momentum is a thing. So hopefully you'll see us in that 1,000 crore range in the next 2 years. And our purpose moved from profit to generating employment. The moment that frame of reference changed, everything changed. Everything changed. And of course, our profitability also changed, went up, right? So I'll leave you with that, Srini. The champagne market is great, but the wine market is bigger than the champagne market. The beer market is bigger than the wine market. But boss, the country liquor market, you guys have no clue, right? So cheers to that, cheers to CFO Bridge, and thank you for having me.